Who's going to win the battle between Miami's struggling offense and North Carolina's struggling defense? Let's go behind enemy lines on the Tar Heels.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, your host. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. And thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by Upside. Download the free Upside app and use promo code LOCKED to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. So in just a moment, we're going to do an epic crossover. You know, we always love it when we can connect with the other Locked On hosts. Isaac Schade from Locked On Tar Heels. He's going to join me. I'm going to join him. We're going to join each other simultaneously on an epic crossover event to talk about this matchup. And, you know, what's going to be the bigger issue? Is it going to be North Carolina's defense that for most of the season hasn't been able to stop a nosebleed? Or is it going to be Miami's offense, who has failed to score touchdowns in 18 of their 21 red zone trips this year? Before we get into the crossover, my friends, we got some positive injury news on Wednesday from head coach Mario Cristobal. I breathe a sigh of relief when it comes to the running back situation. Henry Parrish and Jaylan Knighton. I don't know why I dramatically paused between those two names, but Henry Parrish and the Rooster are going to be full go this week. They've been practicing without limitations. You know, they were banged up, both of them, in the Middle Tennessee game. They're going to be all right. So Miami's running back field is going to be at the highest possible strength it can be in. Obviously, Don Chaney is still a ways away and Citizen's out for the season, but you're going to have the full services of your top three backs. Henry Parrish, who's been one of the most productive backs in the country. Jaylan Knighton, hopefully he can break out this week, and Thad Franklin, who's been pretty darn reliable himself. And then on the defensive side of the football, some good news again. Tyrique Stevenson, he's okay to play. Thank goodness. I mean, you know, just the thought of having to go up against that arsenal of wide receivers in North Carolina, you know, without Tyrique, it was a little frightening. I didn't really have any doubt that he would play, but he got banged up in the last game. He's going to be okay. He's going to play. And so will Darryl Porter. Darryl Porter, another important corner, is going to be good to go as well. Unfortunately, we haven't gotten anything good on Elijah Arroyo, the second string tight end. Based on what I'm hearing, I don't think the prognosis is going to be good for him. You know, keeping my fingers crossed, but don't expect to see him on Saturday. I know there's a lot of rumors out there going on around Arroyo, you know, how severe his injury is. I'm certainly not expecting him to play this week, but Jaleel Skinner needs to step up. We talked about him yesterday. We're buying stock in Jaleel Skinner. Should have had a touchdown in the last game. Was robbed by the referees on that. He's a bigger part of this offense now. But the very good news, Parrish and Knighton will play. Stevenson and Porter will play. Let's go Canes. All right, my friends, we are going to connect now with a guy who really does an awesome job, the great Isaac Schade from Locked On Tar Heels.
Oh man, folks, it's great to be doing some more Thursday crossovers as we're getting into ACC conference play for the Miami Hurricanes. They are kicking off their conference play, first game after an off week. For the Tar Heels, it'll be their second ACC game after, frankly, obliterating Virginia Tech last week. It's so great. For those of you who don't know me, who are Miami people, I'm Isaac Schade, the host of Locked On Tar Heels. For you Tar Heels folks that don't know brother Alex over here, this is Alex Donno, the host of Locked On Canes, and it is great to be together, my man.
Dude, I'm so glad to be able to do this with you because, first of all, you do such an awesome job. And listen, I know I've been kind of sliding into your podcast, especially this week, to kind of get the scouting report. And I know some of my viewers and listeners have been doing the same. So
yes,
I can't wait to get into it. And Isaac, there's really storylines for these two teams heading into this matchup. I mean, my goodness. So I look at it from a Miami side. First of all, I'm having to talk people off of ledges every day, right? Because when you got a Canes team that the last time we saw Miami play, they were losing by multiple touchdowns against Middle Tennessee, who they were
That's right.
favored by 25.5 points again heading into that one. So there are certain Canes fans who look at that and say, how is Miami going to win a game again this year if they can't beat Middle Tennessee? Like, so, but really the big thing that Miami has to figure out, and I know they've been trying to figure this out during the bye week, is just how to get more stability from the passing offense. Like that's been the big challenge for the Canes, where, you know, Tyler Van Dyke got benched last game. There was a little bit of, and, you know, I think this was more fan and media created, but a quarterback controversy, right? I mean, I don't think the coaching staff ever really wavered from Tyler Van Dyke, but there was a lot of speculation because Jake Garcia, he looked pretty good with limited snaps with the Canes offense a couple of weeks ago, but they're sticking with Tyler, which I think it's the mature decision. Keep some stability, give him the opportunity to try to work through some of his own issues and bring back some of that great form that he had last year. But it's been tough, Isaac, because he's adapting to a new offensive system, right? Going from an up-tempo spread to really a Big Ten style of offense. And he's not looked comfortable. He's been staring receivers down. He's been missing some wide receivers. Miami has had a difficult time keeping wide receivers healthy. His favorite target, Xavier Restrepo, is going to be out for several more weeks. Jacoby George is going to be out for at least a few more weeks. So, you know, the best of the bunch recently have really been Frank Ladson, who's starting to come on, former Clemson Tiger, and Keyshawn Smith, who I thought was maybe Miami's only like good player against Middle Tennessee. He really stepped up and looked good in that game. So just finding some rhythm with that passing game, I think is the big thing for me, and how Tyler's going to handle it, because this is the most adversity he's faced since he became the starting quarterback of the Hurricanes. Because, you know, he's made things look pretty easy. I mean, he lost his first couple of starts last year, including against North Carolina. It was a really close game. And then after that, it was just full speed ahead. He did lose to Florida State, but he played great in the second half. And, 6 straight games, he was putting up video game type of numbers. And now a lot of the fan base has turned on Tyler, and a lot of people were rooting for Jake Garcia to be named the starting quarterback. So this is just a great opportunity for Tyler Van Dyke to try and win some of that fan base back.
Man, that's so interesting. And you and I were talking a couple days ago, and I love what you said to me, that you thought this was a really mature coaching staff decision to bring back Tyler. Why do you think that is the case, Alex?
Because I think when you start playing musical quarterbacks, especially this early in the year, it reeks of desperation. And we've had Miami coaches over the years that have done that. Like I can remember, back in 2008 when Randy Shannon couldn't decide between Ja'Cory Harris and Robert Marve, and it was like however he felt when he woke up that morning, who was going to start. And Mark Richt did it a few years ago, 2018, when he would just kind of pull the old quarterback shuffle between Malik Rozier and N'Kosi Perry. And people sometimes, Isaac, will talk about the quarterback position as if it's the same thing as benching a linebacker or benching a guard. And it's just not. Quarterbacks are just a different breed. I think when you have your guy, I'm not going to say you should never bench a quarterback. Obviously, there are certain scenarios where it's appropriate. But I think it's important when you've got, a somewhat proven starter to give them a little time to work through their issues. And also, I think if they had yanked Van Dyke, and they did pull him out of a game, but to not start him is different. If they had decided not to start him, I don't think you can turn back. I think if you turn to Jake Garcia, he's got to be your guy. And then what if Jake struggles? Do you try to switch back to Tyler? So I think he deserves this opportunity. And I think, hopefully it's not to the detriment of Miami's play on the field, because Tyler hasn't looked good the last couple games. But I think it's the right decision by the staff to let him try and work out these issues.
Man, that's really good. Thank you for that explanation. Now, as the quarterback might be a little bit of a question mark for the Canes right now, it is exponentially not for the Tar Heels. Drake Maye is absolutely on fire. What's interesting, the big storyline for the Tar Heels is the current dichotomy between the offense and defense. Whereas Drake Maye has now jumped up to like 11th in BetOnline's Heisman odds. He has 5 total touchdowns in 4 of Carolina's first 5 games. The only quarterbacks with more in the ACC in the last 25 years, some dudes named Taj Boyd and Lamar Jackson, who we all might have heard of, right? And so while the offense is up to I believe they're 7th in the nation in total offense per game, the defense is the huge question mark for this team. They, heading into the Virginia Tech game, were 126th in Division I out of 131 teams in defensive yards allowed per game. And so while the Miami offense might be struggling, it's week on week at this point. And so the question that Tar Heels are asking all over the country right now, from fans to media, was what the Tar Heel defense did against Virginia Tech last week, holding them to 10 points, the first time holding a team under 20 this year, the first time keeping a team scoreless for an entire half. Was that a product of North Carolina taking some steps forward, or was it a product of Virginia Tech's anemic offense, to put it kindly? My take on it all week has been that it's somewhere in between. Clearly, the Tar Heels are taking some strides, moving along, but also we can't count out the fact that Virginia Tech was extremely weak on offense. And so the question then is, heading down to Miami Gardens, what is to be learned, even though Miami has had their fair share of some offensive struggles to start this season? What are we going to find out about this defense on the road? And I know last time the Tar Heels were down in Miami, it was not pretty, shall we say. 62-26, Javonte Williams, Michael Carter putting up more rushing yards on the ground individually than Sam Howell did in the air, which was just stupid. I know that was the case, but what is this going to look like as Miami is really working to see what we've got offensively, while the Tar Heels are still trying to figure themselves out defensively? And so I think both these fan bases are really curious to see what happens on that side of the football. And you and I have even sent some texts back and forth about that this week.
Yeah, I've been wondering because something's got to give, right? You've got an offense that's down bad versus a defense that's down bad. I mean, that's probably where the game is going to be won or lost.
Absolutely.
And the stat, Isaac, that's been most troubling for Miami's offense, because for the most part they've done a decent job moving the football between the 20s. It's once they get into the red zone, they haven't had any answers. Miami has failed to score touchdowns in 18 of their 21 red zone trips this year. Obviously, you hope that's just one of these statistical aberrations that gets kind of worked out throughout the year, but it's been pretty ugly, and most of that was in the Texas A&M game, where they were basically living in the red zone and just not doing anything with it. All right, so that's one of those things where they've just got to in the red zone where everything tightens up. It's a sign of how much the passing game has struggled when they just can't find anyone open in the end zone.
And interestingly enough, the numbers on that are crazy. I didn't realize that. North Carolina's offense is 18 for 20 in the red zone on touchdowns, 19 for 20 scoring. The only time that one where they didn't score was a kneel down at the end of the Florida A&M game. So of their own doing, they're one possession shy of perfection in the red zone. So those stats, that dichotomy is really interesting to me. Man, crazy stuff right there, Donno. I love it. We do want to get more into some of these key matchups, maybe the Carolina D against the Miami O. We'll look at that in just a second, but first, I want to tell you about Upside. From cringing at the pump to getting an eye-popping check at your favorite restaurant, inflation is hitting us all where it hurts. And Donno, it really hurts. And that's why I started using Upside, which is an incredible app for anyone who buys gas, groceries, or dines out. With every purchase, I'm earning cash back thanks to Upside. Now, hear me, Isaac, say I legitimately use this app every time I go to the gas pump. Saved me a ton of money this summer with the gas prices so crazily inflated. It really does work, and I promise you it's easy. So to get started, download the free Upside app, use our promo code LOCKED, and get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. Next, claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside. Check in at the business, pay as usual with the credit or debit card, and get paid. In comparison to credit card rewards or loyalty programs, you can earn 3 times more cash back with Upside. Users are earning more than $1 million every week, and that's probably why they have a 4.8 star rating on the App Store. So download the free Upside app and use promo code LOCKED to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. Again, that's $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more using promo code LOCKED. All right, Mr. Donno, let's get into this. Some key matchups that we each believe are going to win this game for either team? Why don't you start?
Well, man, I'm tempted to go with something on Miami's offense, but knowing the formidable pass offense that Miami's going up against, I think the single most important player on the Miami Hurricanes this weekend is going to be cornerback Tyrique Stevenson.
Okay.
He's Miami's best cover guy, all the experience in the world. He's got good size. He's so big that sometimes people worry a little bit about his speed. I can imagine we're probably going to see a lot of Tyrique Stevenson on Josh Downs. And, when I look at Miami's defense versus North Carolina's offense, it's one of those things, Isaac, where it's like everyone knows North Carolina is going to score. Right. I don't think anyone thinks Miami is going to do to UNC's offense like what UNC just did to Virginia Tech this past weekend. Like, it's going to be, I think it's going to have to be a high scoring game for Miami to win. North Carolina is going to get their points and their yards, but Miami needs to limit the catastrophic plays through the passing game, right? Because you go back to Middle Tennessee, and North Carolina is better than Middle Tennessee, but they do run similar offenses, and Miami was getting burned repeatedly in the passing game. They had 4 plays given up of over 65 yards in the passing game. So I think the Hurricanes are going to change the way that they approach it from a coverage standpoint. I think they're going to be dropping more players back into coverage, playing more zone. I think it was a little bit arrogant how they thought they could just man up and be fine. So I don't think we're going to see as much of that. But I do think someone like Tyrique Stevenson against Josh Downs, that to me, it could very well be the difference in winning or losing this game. Even if UNC scores a lot, if you can keep a couple of touchdowns off the board with good coverage, that gives Miami a chance. What do you think for you guys, a good matchup?
Yeah, man, I agree with that. For Carolina, because of what you said about the Tar Heels are going to score offensively. It's about, as you said, the limiting. I'm going to look at the defense. North Carolina's scheme is a 4-2-5 under Gene Chizik. The linebackers, Power Eccles and Cedric Gray, have been the model of consistency. One of the two of them has led the Tar Heels in tackles all 5 games. They've been top 2 on the team each of the last 3. So I'm not looking at the linebackers. It's the front 4 and then the secondary that's kind of been the downfall. And for me, it all starts up front with that defensive line. Why? I know Carolina's secondary has been much maligned, but I think a lot of that is the lack of pressure that the line has been able to get on the quarterback. And so what I'm really going to be watching for matchup wise is just that entire front. Can the Tar Heels make Tyler Van Dyke uncomfortable in the backfield? If they can, then they might be able to do at least, like, do they have to do exactly what they did against Virginia Tech? No. Miami's offense, regardless of which guy's back there playing quarterback, is going to be better than the Hokies. The poor Hokies are just so bad. But it's kind of what you said. It's that similar thing. Can they do enough to slow down the Canes on offense? Can they get enough pressure to at least cause some uncomfortability in the backfield to allow the secondary to do what they need to do? We saw some progression in the secondary last week, particularly from Tony Grimes. My favorite name in all of college football, our other cornerback, Storm Duck, has struggled a little bit this year and has been picked on. And so, I mean, like right out of the gate, Florida A&M of all teams just came out of the gate throwing at him play after play after play. And so that's somebody I'm watching to see how he continues to step up. Carolina's got some of their secondary a little bit banged up, some guys coming back, but won't be back on Saturday for this game. And so, again, a lot of scoring on the secondary, but for me, I'm watching the line. What can they do to enable the secondary to not have to guard in space for quite as long? And so it's interesting there. We're both looking at some of those. Hey, we got to do some limiting, but ultimately that it's not about stopping, it sounds like, in this game. And that's going to lead to that high scoring outcome that you talked about there, Donno.
Yeah, and I'm glad, you talked about putting pressure on Tyler Van Dyke, because also this is going to be a pivotal game for Miami's offensive line. In the first 3 games, they were looking a lot more physical than they did in 2021, and that's led to a lot of success with the ground game. I mean, Miami, despite the fact they didn't get a whole lot of traction on the ground against Middle Tennessee. They were playing from behind for pretty much the entire game, but one of the better running teams in college football the first 3 weeks, and those the offensive linemen have really taken to the coaching of Mario Cristobal, who's passionate about offensive line play, and Alex Mirabal, the O-line coach. They took a huge step back, though, against Middle Tennessee. Just a lot of guys just looked like they didn't get off the bus for that game. So they need to return to that physicality. I mean, it was even last year was a decent pass blocking unit. The big difference has been the run blocking. And so, we'd all love to see, at least down here, we'd love to see a bounce back game for Tyler Van Dyke. But at the same time, we know Miami's offensive identity. They want to run to set up the pass. And if they can't do that, it's just going to put more pressure on Van Dyke. So it's going to be really important for that offensive line to get into a rhythm early on, because, Miami's got some running backs who can go downhill pretty well. Henry Parrish is a horse, and Thaddeus Franklin is a real big guy, tough to take down, 240 pounds. So, Miami would love to establish that early. And it takes precious time off the clock as well.
Man, that's good stuff. Well, all of that setup, folks, leads us to be able to now get into talking about where we think this game is going to go, predictions, scores, and just final recap of what Mr. Alex Donno and I are watching for. All right, so Donno, as we look at, I checked Bet Online just before we started recording, which is our main betting sponsor here on the Locked On Network. When the lines opened for this, Miami was favored by 3. I had seen, I think it was Monday or Tuesday, the line moved to 3.5, but it's actually back to 3 now, interestingly enough. The over-under kicked off at 65.5 and has bumped up to 66.5. I think the betting markets are seeing what you and I are, that this is probably going to be a high-scoring affair. Last year, I believe 45-42 there in Chapel Hill, which cleared that over very, very easily. And so as you look at the outcome of this game, Mr. Alex Donno, what do you see happening?
Yeah, I'll make full predictions because that's what we do. But the prediction I feel most comfortable with, what you were hinting at, I think I like the over in this game because again, Miami has showed some holes in the defensive secondary. There are certain players that the teams have made a habit out of picking on. You're going to be looking for DJ Ivey out there. He's a guy who's been picked on quite a bit this year. And I'm kind of cautiously optimistic Miami's going to be able to find some points as well. So I think it's going to be a similar score to what we had last year. I think maybe in, home field advantage could maybe be the difference. Hopefully, fans actually show up and go crazy because, I think for a conference game, I think they're going to show up. I'm going to go 42-41 Miami. I think it's going to be a game that comes out to, ironically, in a game of offense, it's going to come down to maybe a final stop. I think that's what we're going to see here. And I think that if a big play needs to be made on defense on a final North Carolina drive, it's probably going to come either from number 56, Leonard Taylor, on that defensive line, maybe a big sack or a big TFL, or it could come from number 0, James Williams, who is usually the playmaker in that safety group.
Okay. Man, that's great. And that's one thing I wanted to ask you. Let me go ahead and ask this are there any lasting ramifications from the hurricane down there in Miami?
Yeah, not really on this side of the state. It was, It's crazy because you drive like 100 miles to the other coast. And yeah, it was really, really bad in like the Naples, Fort Myers area. Yeah. Not really anything to speak of down in the southeastern part of Florida.
Okay, that's what I thought, but it triggered it when you were talking about the home field advantage. It just reminded me. I wanted to ask you if that was any effect on this week or there in Miami.
Well, it could be from this standpoint because I do have to shout out. I know a handful of awesome Canes fans who do drive over from that side of the state. So I don't know. We may have, because I know some of the best Canes fans I know live in the Fort Myers area, and obviously completely understand if some of y'all can't make the trip over this weekend, if you're still, literally repairing your houses and your lives and all that. So it could have a little effect from that standpoint, not so much from the locals, but Miami is a team that people do travel from other parts of the state to see.
Okay. Yes. Thoughts and prayers, man, to all those communities as they do that work of rebuilding. For me, I'm right with you. I am taking the over without thinking about it on this game. I think we get up to a total somewhere in the 80s. I very much agree with that. One thing I want to watch for is we talked about Josh Downs already. One of the great things for the Tar Heels is a couple weeks ago against Notre Dame, Carolina got back their deep threat, Antoine Green, who had missed the beginning of the season due to a collarbone injury suffered in preseason. Missed the first 3 games, but then Carolina had an off week, came back against Notre Dame, had 2 touchdowns of over 60 yards, and then had some more big plays last week. And so while there will be focus on Josh Downs, I think a lot of taking the top off of it with Antoine Green. Also, Carolina has been, and I know Miami is a program that does this a lot, but Carolina has been able to get their tight ends involved in a big way. They have a guy to watch out for. It's not the starting tight end, which would be Kamari Morales, but Bryson Nesbitt, who is kind of he is a tight end, but he's this tight end wide receiver hybrid that's been coming into his own a little bit that Drake Maye loves to go to. So watch for him. One of the things I'm really curious about, you talked about some of that, the run game for Miami. Carolina came into the season looking at having a really strong running back room. Due to some injuries and other things, that room has shrunk down significantly to where most of the season, the starter has been true freshman Omarion Hampton, who wasn't even an early enrollee. He came in the summer, but just is an absolute stud. However, last week, Caleb Hood, who has been in the program for several years, got the starting nod. So really curious to see what the Tar Heels do there. They did pick up over, it was like 170 on the ground against Virginia Tech, who was only allowing 80-something per game, which is stupid. But that's going to be something to watch. Carolina has had a lot of success through the air, but what can they do on the ground? Ultimately, I think it'll be enough. And it's funny, I was going to go with an absolute mirror score to last year, 45-42 again. But interestingly, you talked about a defensive stop. While it's Carolina scoring tons of touchdowns, I'm actually going to go with a field goal to win this game as time expires. Just, why not? It's college football.
Yeah.
And we don't. So, but man, Donno and I are right there together in that 40-something range for both teams. And I think that is probably a very legitimate expectation for us to look at.
Yeah, and I love it. Like, man, it's crazy how like making predictions kind of part of our job. I hate doing it because I feel like I can never win. If I predict Miami to lose, they get on me. If I predict Miami to win and they lose, you bushed us, you caused this. So, oh man, let's hope for a tie. I know you can't tie in college football, but man.
And then we wind up on cold takes exposed, and it's a whole thing, man. Yeah, but man, it really seems like what I think we've said it several times. I think the thing that we're all watching for is what happens when Miami has the football. As you said earlier, I think that is what ultimately decides the outcome of this game.
Yeah, I agree. And Miami's gotten some decent injury news this week. Their running back core, which has been affected by long-term injuries, the short-term injuries are looking okay because Henry Parrish and Jaylan Knighton will both be fit to play, as will on the defense Tyrique Stevenson, who I mentioned will be very important, and another corner, Darryl Porter, are both healthy enough to play. So that's going to be big. And hopefully, Isaac, we get through clean game, no injuries, because we never want to see that. And may the team that scores the most points win.
That's usually how this game works out, Alex Donno. And let's be honest, this is a huge game for the Coastal. The division is wide open, it seems like. Teams taking some weird losses. Whoever wins this game probably has a really good leg up in the ACC Coastal.
Amen to that.
All right, we're going to see it all playing out at 4 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday. To you Canes fans, to you Tar Heels fans, thank you so much for tuning in. We can't wait to see a great game Saturday afternoon.
Truly awesome stuff there from Isaac. And guys, make sure you check out his show, Locked On Tar Heels. Support his work. We've got great shows all across the Locked On network, including Locked On ACC. I do the Thursday episode every week with Candace Cooper, who does a tremendous job taking you around the conference in 30 minutes or less. So make sure you check out the Thursday episode. I am on it with Candace. And thank you for making us your first listen. We'll be back next time on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.